Good evening and welcome to our monthly All Hands. Thank you for joining us tonight. Again, my name is Jim Lawrence, Board Chair, San Mateo County, and a proud member of the Coalition for a Safer San Mateo County. A few words on our mission to secure an oversight board in Inspector General's office via an ordinance from the Board of Supervisors. I believe we got a big win the other day, a little in disguise though. Here's why. The Board of Supervisors actually put a project on the Sheriff's Office responsibility and gave it to themselves, rather than an independent oversight board, the role of oversight. By saying that they will do oversight rather than farming out meant a couple of things. One, everyone is in agreement that the current sheriff is well-liked and moving in the right direction. Two, they gave credence to the perspective of members of the community of color, that law enforcement's mixed conduct is systematic and a continuing problem. Three, they recognize that independent oversight of the Sheriff's Office with subpoena power is a necessary component. Now, politically, they said that the issue is so important that they cannot farm it out to, in their words, an unproven solution. This means that the attention to the Sheriff's Office independent oversight has risen to the level of the entire Board of Supervisors. So our challenge is to make sure we hold the board accountable to this commitment and make sure that FxSMC is involved in the development process going forward. So our work continues and your support is very much still needed, for sure. And again, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having us. Beth and I started in our care earlier this year in the first quarter, and we're a community group established to honor the humanity of our youth in our legal system because they're both ours, and that makes it our responsibility. We're also here to shine a light on the work of the JJDPC, which we feel is doing great work and it was largely being ignored. And we have a couple of main priorities. The first priority is to put pressure on our district attorney to stop charging children as adults. And the other priority we have is supporting the implementation of the JJDPC annual inspection report, which will be out again the end of this month, and Beth is going to speak to shortly. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry. So why should we think about why is it important not to be charging children as adults? And there's 5 main reasons listed here. And I think it's really interesting that in the 17th century here in this country, we charged anybody over the age of 7 as an adult. So we've gotten a lot smarter than we were back in the 17th century, but not smart enough. What we want is for children under the age of 18 years of age to not be charged as adults. And both science and the Supreme Court agree that full development of the human brain happens somewhere between the age of 24 and 26 years of age. And that's why a juvenile system was created, to take care of those youth who are not yet fully developed. So what's the benefit to our community if we are keeping children in a center that was created for them? We hear cries everywhere about wanting safety in our community, and we all want that. Approximately 98% of the children that go through that are incarcerated and go through our legal system here, approximately 98% of these youth return to our community. And how do we want that to look? How do we want that to be? Statistics show us that youth tried and held in a juvenile system have a lower recidivism rate than if they are sent to an adult prison. And they're much more amenable to rehabilitation, precisely because they're still developing. And instead of being set in their ways like some of us might be, they still have, there's the great hope for them to be rehabilitated and to come back to us as much healthier youth. Despite the disparities in the development across racial or ethnic groups, I think the numbers on the slide here, Jim spoke to this a minute ago, the numbers on the slide speak to themselves, so I'm going to let you draw your own conclusions. But the 3 youth that the district attorney has pursued as adults this year are all 3 Latinos. And one of those youth is still in jeopardy. And I can't help but say that since that youth was incarcerated a year ago this last Saturday, 2 more similar cases have come about with white adult males, and both those people have been released. So again, I'll let you draw your own conclusions on what's going on there. Next slide here, you see these pictures. Our children don't belong here. And the middle picture is a youth in solitary confinement in an adult prison. And they're very often sent to adult prisons for their own protection. So they don't get raped or murdered. But what this does to their mental state, I can't even begin to think, okay, when they're long-term sensory deprivation. This is not the way we need our kids to return to us. Next slide. These are the organizations so far that have signed on to support the JJDPC resolution. And we'd like to ask you, please, to let us know of any others that might be interested. We'd like to reach out to them. And I'll turn this over to Beth.
Thanks, Becca. I'll first mention why In Our Care supports sheriff oversight. It's because law enforcement encounters with youth are an integral part of the school to prison pipeline that we're seeking to interrupt. And that includes encounters with sheriff's deputies. So focusing on youth incarceration here locally, our county has 2 main facilities. Both are in San Mateo. You've probably seen them right near the junction of Highway 280 and 92. There's the main Youth Services Center facility, and then Camp Kemp is right nearby, and that's just for girls who qualify. Every year, the Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention Commission conducts inspections of those facilities, and their reports detail numerous alarming conditions there. To name just a few, the food. Even though the facilities have their own commercial kitchens, the Redwood City Jail makes the food and trucks it over to the youth facilities where it's served the next day, making it impossible to preserve its quality. So the kids often throw the food away. Dinner is served at 4 p.m. or earlier, leading the kids to go to bed hungry. And all of this at an expenditure of $180 per child per day. Another stunning feature is profound underutilization of the spaces. The Youth Services Center routinely houses just 20 kids in a facility with a capacity of 180. The campus is vast. It's got 6 housing units. It has its own school, its own gym, extensive outdoor spaces, and much more. Camp Kemp has a capacity of 30, but routinely holds just 1 or 2 girls at a time. And right now it's actually empty. So just want you to imagine how many different ways 180 beds could alleviate other social problems in our community besides incarcerating people. There's also another glaring deficiency in terms of discriminatory access to programming. There's really good programming available for the girls at Camp Kemp. It's a model, it's an award-winning program. It's very home-like, and instead of locked cells, there are dormitories. And it really prepares girls to return to their families and communities. The problem is there is no reciprocal boys program whatsoever. So just showing you a picture here, you've got the Youth Services Center on the left. All those green doors are locked cell doors. And then on the right, you have the warm and home-like environment at Camp Kemp. There's no substance abuse or sexual abuse trauma services at either facility. So a few asks we're asking of you tonight, and we can put these in the chat. We're asking you to sign a petition to urge the DA to stop charging youth as adults. And you can go to this bit.ly link to add your name to the change.org petition. You can join our email list where we will, once the new inspection reports come out from the commission, um, detailing the current conditions. We'll be putting together an action. And if you join our blast list, we will keep you posted on that and other opportunities to take action on these conditions. You can follow us on Instagram at FxSMC, and please connect us with other groups you think might be interested in our efforts. And you can connect with us by reaching us at inarcaresmc@gmail.com, and research and inspection reports are available on our website at inarcare.org. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And there is one question in the chat, and that is In Our Care looking for any volunteer or partner organizations?
We definitely are interested
Yes.
in partner organizations. Please do reach out to us. I'll put our email in the chat.
Okay. And then there's another question in the chat about what about Camp Glenwood?
Yes, so Camp Glenwood closed in 2018, and there were all kinds of promises. Camp Glenwood was the boys' equivalent to Camp Kemp, and it closed in 2018. There were all kinds of promises that something equivalent would open right up, and that hasn't happened.
Okay. And then finally, because I know we need to get moving, is what can we do to get substance abuse and sexual abuse care going?
We can advocate for it. So I feel like we've run way over time, but we share your passionate interest in this. Our kids need that treatment.
Yeah,
Kids in
get
this
on our
community.
blast, get on our email blast, and we'll reach out to you in regards to that.
Thank you. And please put those links in the chat so people can see them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, you both. That's so important. And hearing what we're doing with the juveniles and in our care is so closely related to us looking at the history in our country of sheriffing. And I do want to apologize to the interpreters and to everyone else here for making so many mistakes and trying to get them into the interpreting channel and getting slowed down. So apologies. I wanted to introduce our speaker, RJ Jennings. He is a passionate leader and executive coach, a development consultant. He's dedicated his life's work to motivating others to move deeper into their desire to affect sustainable change. He works with business executives, teams, community leaders in Silicon Valley, South Africa, Australia, and across the US. RJ inspires others to access answers from within, and in doing so, he helps to identify practices that cultivate skillful interactions and unique leadership opportunities. His commitment to peace and social justice is in his DNA and is rooted in the ethics of his grandfather, who found a creative way to acquire property in the Deep South during an age when African Americans were not allowed to own property. His mother was a part of the Great Migration. His father was a leader of the NAACP in Berkshire County, Massachusetts. He's the founder of RJ Jennings Group and a team contributor at Palette 17 and on the board of directors for the Peace Alliance. He's also an active member of Coastside Families Taking Action and one of our favorite volunteers in Fixin.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you. And thanks everybody for being here and being committed to this work. It lives deep in my heart. Recently I had a conversation with our group, and I talked about the energy that's created when we begin an organization, or we begin raising our children. And so the energy that we create, and I talked a little bit about how the energy that started the policing in America is something that lives within the policing of America. And so I want to take a look at that and just take a moment to acknowledge that our country has been trained to see, especially youth of color, as adults. And that although it seems very logical that we move away from that, that energy doesn't dissipate because we know it's right. And it's just an example. So, so one is, some of you, you've heard a little bit of my story. And I originally was born in South Side of Chicago. And as I often say, that the fact that I'm not in prison or on drugs or dead is a miracle, because the South Side of Chicago, at 9, I knew that that was my limitation. And I recall a cousin asking me to begin to formulate, well, what is I call now a declaration of what I wanted to see in the future. And I decided to play along, and I started to visualize being that guy on the plane wearing a tie. Now, I didn't see myself on TV that way. Whenever I turned on the news or I turned on TV, I saw my skin color in handcuffs, and that this abuse that was going on throughout our community. And it was very limiting as a child, but I knew that my options were very limited. And so this positive role model coming in and inviting me to create an energy to begin to do something different in my life. And as a result, my mother, who was a single mom, having a hard time raising and controlling me in a very tough part of town, decided to send me to Massachusetts to live with her sister, my aunt, and uncle, who became my second set of parents. And hard as a youth to accept that, because I was struggling with being sent away. And later I understood the sacrifices she made. But what happened was, the energy that I moved into was an energy where people would ask me, where do I want to go to school? Where do you want to go to college? And not if you want to go, or even if we didn't understand what college was. And I began to understand that I was in an environment where I was seen. And it was hard for me to really grasp that I, as a Black person here in the States, could be seen and expected to do well in the world. And I bring this up, one, from an energy standpoint, that we have the ability to create this declaration and create an energy that propels our community forward. And it's hard work. And the other was that it began to just shine a light on how important it is for us to create the role models and the vision for our young adults, our young children, to have something to move forward to. And that began to move me forward into this life. And here I sit with you, but which is still blowing my mind. That energy lives, our ability to do that. The energy of trauma lives, as many of you know, that your ancestors, a hard life of getting us here, that the trauma of that lives in our sinews, and that it's there, and it doesn't go away. One of the basic examples of it is that if you watch, sometimes you watch a puppy or a dog walk in a circle and lay down. And the belief of that is that somewhere in the plains where there was high grass, dogs had to mat the grass down so that they and their puppies could lay down in the grass. And although that's been eons ago, it still lives in the body. It still is a process that we go through. So what I want to impart is this sense of an energy that created our policing in America, and the long journey it takes to begin to create practices that will begin to shift that. I think one is that we have a great sheriff right now. The programs that are being offered are looking at policing differently. The fact that we, as Fixing, are really focused on bringing oversight and the ability to see what is going on behind the curtain. These are practices that begin to help shift that energy so that we can actually feel safe, where we can live in a world where we feel everyone is treated equally. So one of the things to know is that the history of policing is very limited if you go out and look for it. And I think that's by design, but we'll cover at least a little bit of what I know of here. So if you go to the first slide, or the next slide, the history of has been tracked back to slavery in colonial America. That the initial policing was done by what they call slave patrols. It was an unofficial police in America. This was formed to ensure that slaves did not rebel, that any runaway slaves were brought back, and their responsibility was to capture and bring them back, and to find free slaves, free Negroes, and bring them back and enslave them. The rights of the slave patrol was that discipline was expected and that they needed to be taught a lesson. And so beating, whipping, if they gave them too much of a problem, even hanging was used to continue to discourage the act of running away from the plantation. Because slavery was the key to maintaining an economic status quo. And so obviously it comes back to our money, our greed. But this was the beginning of the policing in America. Next slide. Post-Civil War, the slave patrols morphed into policing units. Once again, wealthy Southerners felt threatened, worried about the economy. Therefore, the birth, or not necessarily the birth, but the uprising of the Ku Klux Klan was sanctioned and often encouraged even by law. Police were given the same rights of inflicting punishment on the Black community and to ensure that segregation was held, and that in the long run, it was about enslaving African Americans post-Civil War. This was done to rebuild the South. Go ahead, next slide. So the laws that we're working with, or that our sheriff's department, our policing in America was working with, was focused on segregation. It emboldened police to inflict harm, to keep Blacks in line. Obviously, those of you who know of the Jim Crow laws was set up to ensure segregation was promoted, that the services offered were not equal across the board, and that they could use prison as a form of slavery. The 13th Amendment had a loophole that the amendment was free the slaves except as a form of punishment. So this encouraged police to round up African Americans for disobeying Jim Crow laws and imprison them. So the beginning of our official police force was in 1704. And it was a rollout from these slave patrols. Therefore, the focus was the same. What does it create? It created bias in the media coverage, a lack of positive role models, lack of access to resources, and lack of equity. And that as we look at especially entertainment and media, it continued to exasperate this form of vision of people of color across America. Next slide. So what I invite everyone to do is a big part of my work is sematics. Sematics is an old Greek term. The Greeks believed that they were building citizens that were physically fit, emotionally balanced, mentally alert, spiritual with a moral compass. That it wasn't just exercise, it was actually understanding the ethos of those at your side. That we begin to take a look at our own self and how we respond under duress. It gives us an insight as to how, as humans, we respond. In a basic form, we call that fight, flight, or freeze. And begin to understand ourselves, and we want to begin to find practices that allow us to shift ourselves when we find ourselves under duress, to reorganize ourselves around our nervous system, to show up differently. And this is our invitation as we move forward in creating a law enforcement that we can count on. What are these practices that would allow them to see the world, see people of color fairly differently? And so we start with ourselves. We're playing an active role here in fixing, of creating a vision for law enforcement. And as we know, it hasn't been easy. It's been a battle, an uphill battle. We want to bring the unheard voices into the room and create a safe environment for our children and our family.
Excuse me.
I think, is that so? So the sense of how do we continue to work together to ensure that we not only get this oversight through, but that we have key elements in it that will help continue to create an environment where we can practice to be different.
Queremos crear un ambiente
So that's the bulk of what I'd like to offer this evening.
y eso es lo que quisiera ofrecer esta noche.
Thanks, RJ. I do have a question. I have to unmute myself. And so given our history and our present, do you envision a time
Muchísimas gracias.
Black boys and men
Ustedes,
be safe
cuando los
and feel
chicos
trust in law enforcement? And if
iban
so,
a confiar
what does
en los
getting there
policías.
look like?
Hmm.
And I think we need to adjust our interpretation.
Y queremos saber cómo se ve eso.
Ruby, your mic is on.
Yeah, I just turned it off and I'll try to move her back into the interpretation channel.
Okay, thank you.
Beautiful question. My personal experience is that I'm a strong believer that, as Martin Luther King stated, he had a dream that I think he knew that he would not see this happen in his lifetime. And I probably will not see it fully formed as I would like to in my lifetime, but I do see a day in which that could possibly happen.
Pero se ve un día.
And I say that from the perspective that this past year, working closely with Sheriff Christina Corpus and meeting the staff and what she's bringing in inspires me that there can be change. And it's a long haul, it's a long battle, to get people to change and to look at the issues that are out there, especially how we're trying youth as young adults. So the answer is, yes, it will happen. I'd
Los
love to know
menores de
when,
edad
but it will happen.
como adultos.
So another question is, how do we avoid having sheriff oversight co-opted by the same forces that brought us to need oversight in the first place?
Well, the good news is that we have great leadership with Jim Lawrence, Nancy Goodban, we've got Elsa, we've got a crew that they're taking no prisoners, if you will. So I really feel that what I'm enjoying right now is that even after our recent meeting with the Board of Supervisors, is that I feel the energy actually amping up, that we are still reaching out, ensuring that we're touching the right people, that we're giving them the tools they need to make the right decisions. And I don't think we're going to be satisfied until we get what we need in this.
Okay. And what do you think about changes in hiring practice? How can we change the hiring practice for law enforcement to have an impact?
That's a beautiful question. And I'm an ex-HR person. And the fact that we have heard repeatedly that oversight will prohibit hiring, to me, is almost laudable, because my sense is that someone who is worried about oversight is probably not the person we want on our staff to begin with. I think that how we recruit and how we invite them into this beautiful community and to be a part of this. We want to invite them into this environment where Christina Corpus has brought in some great people who are thinking out of the box. And my sense is that if that doesn't attract them, then we need to keep looking. And I know it's going to be hard, and it's hard all across the country, but my sense is that if this is what scares them, then thanks for reaching out. We'll see you.
Yes. Thank you. One more question. Can you talk a little bit about the over-incarceration in the US and the use of free prison labor as a motivator for that? How do we break that economic motivation, especially for incarcerating people of color?
Right. In very few areas, we are seeing politicians who are committed to closing detention centers, in some cases prisons, and creating and relying on programs to shift this. And it is a big ask, but I think that we need to continue to knock on that door and understand that incarceration and the system that we have that supports a few is not a way of empowering our people. And so I think we need to continue to be selective in, in who we bring into office. We need to continue to have organizations like Fixing who take on these initiatives and push them forward. But I think that that is a beautiful question. And it's been really beautiful to hear some areas across the country that are actually taking the stance and taking that risk.
Okay. Well, speaking of running for office, there is a question about, have you ever thought about running for office?
I'm going through a tunnel right now. I can't hear you. To be honest with you, lately it has been in the forefront, a little bit, but but the good news is that in my district right now, I have some great people who are out there. You know, locally, I've got Joaquin Jimenez, who's here, and he's, you know, in my bailiwick, in my district, and then Ray Mueller, who, you know, has been doing well, and I want to keep continuing to work hard to make sure he stays on the track that supports us. So right now, I feel that we are in good hands, but we'll see.
Okay. Well, I have a couple of people who are saying they feel encouraged and thank you for your input. And that, you know, you've made some powerful statements and insights that they appreciate. And Bill wants to know, what are some of your starting points? What do you believe maybe some day-to-day examples that you think will help us make changes in law enforcement, in working with law enforcement, and how they perceive our communities?
Right. The first thing that I'm doing, and yet I really want to impress that you need to create a path that feels right for each of you, right? The first thing I'm doing is, I have a 4-year-old, and I make it a point when the sheriffs are in my area to stop them, to talk to them, to say hello. That, you know, the theory is that you don't shoot someone when you know their name. And so one is, I know I'm waiting for the sheriff's department to shift and the policing to shift, but I also need to shift myself, because I've grown up avoiding the police. That my experiences with them have been varied, and most of it has been on the uglier side. And so it's easy for me to step back. And the harder thing for me to do is to find my own conditioned tendency, which is to push away from them, to recenter, and now reach out. And so the sense of reaching out to be there and meet them. The other is to understand and know what's the training that's going on in my local area, right? That's information that we are privy to, and to know what is going on and what to expect, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other is, I can't press enough that these grassroots organizations need us. And I know it's hard work, but we need to stand up and step in and be heard. And the other, which is important for me, I live in a community of which is over 32% Latino, is I'm on the Parks and Rec Commission. And I want to make sure that everyone is invited to the events, that everyone is invited to participate in these sporting events, and to get our youth mingled and together and connected, right? And it's an effort, because, you know, basically people have been told don't bother up until now, right? And all of a sudden we expect them to just people to walk in. And so it's hard work. So.
Okay. All right. So I have a couple hard questions for you here.
Okay.
Clearly, you're a supporter of Christina Corpus, and you think she's being open and doing a great job in terms of trying to change the culture of the sheriff's department. Michael would like to know, why do you think that the sheriff, for all her good work and intentions, thinks that oversight is a problem for hiring? She has shown herself to be a positive agent for change. So why do you suppose that she has that position? And he also says, great work and thank you.
Thank you. I don't want to speak for Christina. I have some ideas and thoughts. And one thing I will say is that the sheriff's department is still an organization, and there's still a view from within that I've never experienced. So I don't want to speak for her. And I know that there is a machine there that continues to turn. So I don't know what the pressure is for her to take the stand that she's taking. I do know that she is doing some work to try to offer programs, not nearly as robust as what we need. But so Michael, I really, I hate to, I just don't want to step on her toes. I think that, she is doing, I think, a good job. And I think that the good news is that we have the ears and hopefully the hearts of the Board of Supervisors. And that what I want to ensure is, no matter who is in Christina Corpus's position, is that we feel safe, whoever's in there. Because our previous sheriff, it doesn't mean that in 6 years we won't have another individual similar to that comes from the blue line. So this is the right thing to do. So
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And another one, do you think that common sense reforms like sheriff oversight are enough? What do you think about the abolitionist movement, which said because of its inhumane origins, law enforcement will always be problematic?
Wow. We are human. And as humans, we are conditioned and we're shaped first by our parents. And then we're shaped by relatives and community. And then it goes into the institution, into schools. And then it's our religion. And it's geographical. My sense is that none of us walk through this world without having some prejudice within us. It's just natural. I think we see how we are in our families, and it's the right way to do it, and it permeates. So my sense is that it's problematic because we are human. It's problematic because the training that has been given up until now has really been focused on people of color. It's problematic because our children are watching shows that denigrate people of color and assign gangs and labels to us throughout. And there's no way that we can expect an individual to walk in, take a gun to protect us, and lose all of that which has shaped us, right? So that's why I say that training is a step. The practice is what begins to really change us. That 400 reps for an athlete, they begin to change. It's muscle memory. 3,000 reps for you and I, the layperson, we begin to embody an action. When we get up in the morning, we drive to work, we take a right, we take a right, we take a right. We know on Thursday we have to take a left and go to the dry cleaner. We get up and we still take a right, right? It's just how we're wired, right? Mm-hmm. So to shift it is not just a training program, it's practices that we need to instill. It's having the officers join us at the fiesta that we had for the Spanish immersion program here this weekend, that we had a fiesta and it was all the grades of kids who are in the Spanish immersion program, right? For them to show up and see and be a part of that community is a practice. It begins to shape how we see and feel our community.
Okay. And one last question regarding the training, and that is, how do we respond to the militarization and the warrior mentality that many law enforcement units are trained in? How do we demilitarize the police, the enforcement of keeping people of color dehumanized?
Right, right. Yeah, that is a big question. Mm-hmm. That's the last question is a question that will live for a long time, right?
Yeah.
In some cases, there may be things that we need from that. but I think that we're in a age now where we can begin to shift that training. And so I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. I believe embedded in that question is a realization that things have to change, that we have to be able to, as officers, as men, as human beings, to be able to hug and have a wide range of an emotional journey. And I think up until now, it has been a warrior mentality. I think that someone like Chris Song, who is working with Simon Sinek on the why, is a great example. He's working with him on, why are we policing? Why are we here in the community? Why are we taking a gun into a conversation that doesn't need a gun, right? Like, those are the people that I think will begin to question us on how can we look at this differently. I met with the Santa Cruz Sheriff's Department at one point and had lunch with their captain, I believe. And we really talked about that. We talked about how their commitment is, don't take a gun into a conversation that doesn't need a gun. And to hear this officer say that is their commitment, right, is a big step. So we have to continue to look at these programs and share this and make sure that, we're the wealthiest county in the country, right? I mean, if anybody should be on the edge of the forefront of this wave, it should be us, right? So, let's access the resources that we have and make the difference.
Well, thank you very much, RJ. I want to let you know that you have a lot of thank yous and appreciation for your talk tonight in the chat, and also a few votes if you decide to run for office. So.
Well, much love and gratitude to all of you here and the core of our fixing. I just love you all and what you do daily and the energy that you bring. And I just want to point out that we're going to keep asking for more. So thank you. We'll see you even deeper into this.
And we will hopefully see everybody on Friday, December 1st at our Fixin' annual holiday party from 6 to 8 at UUFRC in Redwood City. I believe Nancy put a link in the chat so that you can RSVP, and we would love to have you all. We're going to celebrate our wins and just have a good time enjoying life together. And with that, I will turn it over to Nancy. Thank you.
Thank you, Trina, and thank you so much, RJ. We'll share your slide deck and also the In Our Care slide deck when we send out the recording. But we were going to have a bit of a roundtable on what's next with oversight, but I think Jim did cover that, and we're pretty much out of time. We do expect that oversight is going to come back to the board possibly as early as next week and possibly as late as December 5th. We think they want to do it next week so they can bring an ordinance and vote on it, and then in another month vote on it final. And so our effort is to say to them, make sure you keep the community involved, keep the coalition involved, number one. The coalition wants to select 2 members, and we want to be involved in figuring out how to select and do the application. And then number 2, make sure that civilian advisory board you're talking about with 9 people has actual duties and authorities, including the authority to access information that they need to do their job. And then number 3, think about that Inspector General monitor that you talked about contracting out in case something happened with a media blowup like with the Batmobile, and realize that isn't a good model for making change, waiting till you're embarrassed. And so please consider the Santa Clara model, which works really well. They have an ongoing monitor with a regular contract that has a set of duties, like their civilian board has a set of incidents they're supposed to look at, policies they're supposed to audit. They're supposed to do their own kinds of audit as well as audit the sheriff. And so we're asking the board to consider those. Anybody who wants to help can join in, and thank you to all who spoke at the Board of Supervisors this morning. Jim, did you want to say anything? We have 30 seconds.
Just a couple words I want to say. I know everybody's familiar with the football season, but we made the playoffs. We just made the playoffs. There's still a Super Bowl out there, so there's still work to be done, as Nancy outlined it to it, and we're working at it hard every day, but we need your support. This is going to take a community to move and make change with the Board of Supervisors. So thank you for your support, and looking forward to working with you going forward.
Thank you all
Good
for
night,
coming.
everybody.
See you December 1st. Thanks, Trina.
Thank you.